Greetings, Witchlings. Ever since Beyoncé took center stage and stole the show at Super Bowl 2016, you may have heard mumblings from certain demographics that the show was racist or somehow anti-white. Today I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into this topic and dredge the bottom of the ideology that lies underneath it. By no means could this talk cover everything within structural and systemic racism, and in no way am I qualified to speak on every issue within this complex and nuanced topic. I do not want to erase people of color and their voices. However, what I can speak to involves my lived experience in a society that has animosity towards different, in addition to what I've learned through my academic career. Perhaps that will act as a stepping stone to bridge the gap where a rampantly corrupt system has failed us all, specifically our public education system. Stick with me until the end of the video and you just might learn a new perspective. Unless you're afraid of something, kind of like how most people would be afraid of this hot sauce. Dave's Scorpion Pepper Gourmet! Ah! I promise that was totally not a sponsor, but if you stick with me, then we'll see how tough that stuff is. Sound good? Fair shake? I get hurt, you get knowledge. You gotta love that. Discussing white supremacy and privilege, or the power structures in place that allow Eurocentric ideals to exist and dominate, often gets met with accusations of preaching white guilt. That is nothing more than a belief, an opinion. It has no business being in a reality where evidence exists to tell us about the state of systems, whether that system be the cosmos at large or structures that are in place that are oppressing individuals. The fact is, we are all indoctrinated from a very young age, pretty much independent of geographic location. If you are within a Eurocentric country, then you were taught that your roots were well crafted. Here in America, we're taught that our democracy is infallible with beautiful, well-crafted roots. To paraphrase an enormous amount, here we're taught that we should obey all white male figures in history and that they are the epitome of greatness, and that we should all aspire to be like them, regardless of your gender. It wasn't the teacher's fault in most cases. We can't get mad at people just reading out of the book. We can't get mad at people that are just preaching to the standardized test that they're told that they have to give to people. Here in the US, it has an enormous amount to do with our textbooks and the people that control them. Due to the habit of one particular state, the one I'm from, there is a veritable monopoly on our textbooks. You see, Texas has a nasty habit of purchasing 2 to 3, sometimes even more, textbooks for each individual student. Generally, it's under the guise of, our children could never carry those textbooks to and from school, so obviously they need one at home, and then an extra one just in case that one gets lost. Due to this massive taxpayer expenditure, the epitome of big government, this allows the Texas State Board of Education to pretty much dictate to the publisher what is going to be in these books. Whatever they desire is pretty much put in without question. Often this involves linguistic modification. In other words, it sugarcoats the objective truths. It glorifies prominent white figures, generally males, erases completely other figures, and often completely glosses over what actually happened within our human history. There's very little actual substance most of the time to these textbooks. This type of behavior is known as historical revisionism, and it's summed up by the quote, "History is written by the victor." This has been going on for centuries. It's by anyone in power, and typically this involves the cisgender, white, heterosexual, elite male. To be honest with you, kids in the United States right now would be better off going to the Wikipedia articles for history, rather than reading a textbook that's gone through the Texas beautification process. While there are many questionable revisions in these textbooks, the one that's of particular interest to us today is the way that democracy is discussed. This is often done deliberately, as Eurocentric ideals often start with aligning oneself closely with ancient Greeks and the Roman Empire, as individuals from those periods are often elevated to deity-like status within those societies. Numerous people will have heard of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, but only trace amounts will have ever heard of Sappho or Enheduanna. We not only align our democratic republic with these individuals, we even attempt to align our bodies. We glorify these civilizations because they are what white supremacists want us to believe represent the pinnacle of all human achievement. Textbooks very often erase the contribution and influence that empires run by people of color had on these civilizations. They mislead us into believing that art techniques and other ideas were only developed there, and that everywhere else in the world was just vast nothingness. And this idea isn't new either. Often a 5th century historian by the name of Thucydides is cited as the main example of historical revisionism at its finest. He is also generally given credit for the idea that Greeks are fundamentally different from non-Greeks. This desire for separation and domination is echoed throughout Thucydides' histories, and it may be one of the main reasons why right-wing demagogues attempt to align their governance and themselves more in line with this ancient civilization. Look at pretty much any statue from Greece from the 5th century and you will find that our beauty standards today are somewhat in alignment with that still. Sure, a few things may have changed over time, but the particular facial characteristics and body types contained within that art still dominates our mind today. As further evidence of our societal bias, even young children in psychological experiments have a predisposition and a bias towards selecting white when they think of beautiful. Perhaps the best way to highlight and illustrate this point would be to return to the legacy of Enheduanna, the Akkadian high priestess living in the Mesopotamian region that was our first female author that we know of. Fast forward to present day, and if you Google an image of her, you will find individuals with light skin and European facial features, an unlikely occurrence in the Sumerian city-state of Ur. This overglorification of light skin, European features, and body types is exactly why we see people of color erased from public spaces and often whitewashed if they are included at all. The bodies of people of color within our society today are by far the most attacked, degraded, and disrespected out of any demographic. This most often comes in the form of revocation of consent, whereby a white individual may either choose to touch a person of color's hair, or maybe even their genitals, as some celebrities have done. A lot of people defend this as harmless social interaction. However, this is not just simple social interaction. This is a display of power and ownership over another individual's body without their consent. It is rooted in the idea that bodies with more melanin within them are somehow lesser than those without. Let me be abundantly clear. There is no scientific evidence to support that race has anything to do with intelligence, ability to form ideas, or anything else. That was merely pseudoscience used by white individuals to gain power and acceptance for their ideologies. These assaults and daily violations force people of color to navigate a world that no white individual could ever learn through life experience. Ever. Period. It's not something that white individuals have to deal with. And that's exactly what white privilege is. Privilege is any immunity granted or gained from being within a specific group. For those that haven't read a wide variety of sources or attempted to educate themselves on this matter by themselves, it's of course understandable that the celebration of one's identity and existence or heritage can be viewed as an attack on the individual that is looking from the outside in. While it is understandable for an individual to do this, that in no way excuses the individual from the consequences of their actions, and it therefore, the ideas in question, should be combated at every turn. So now that you made it through the video, let's try that hot sauce. I assume that this is an acceptable amount, and that this is an acceptable chip. So here we go. As you can see, down the hatch. Oh, no, some of it dropped off, so fire in the hole. So, it's very warm, and while it may not look like I'm dying, it's quite hot. And I'm sure most people probably wouldn't, I'm sure most people wouldn't react the way I'm doing, but I eat a lot of spicy things all the time, so it's not that bad actually. I like the taste. If you like it, you should try it. Just saying. And again. I wouldn't want anybody to say I wasn't trying. I mean, that's no fun. While I'm busy dying, I'd like you to know that I appreciate you watching the entire video, and that you should know that you are incredible, and that I hope you stay safe. Until next time, I'm Gwen. Bye!